Why do people act like having standards is a bad thing? I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind recently because I genuinely don't understand when this became a negative, like when this became a bad thing. Like, why do people act like having standards is somehow controversial? I feel like nowadays, the second someone says they have standards, they're immediately labeled as judgmental, too picky, arrogant, or like they're better than everyone else. And I just don't think that's true. In fact, I actually think the opposite is true. I think more people should have standards. Not because you should walk around believing you're above other people, of course not, but because standards are one of the biggest ways you protect your peace, your time, your energy, and just like the direction of your life. The older I get and the more mature I become, the more I realize that almost every important decision we make comes down to one question. And that one question is, what am I willing to accept? Because that's really what standards are. They're not about rejecting people. They're not about demanding perfection. They're about deciding what aligns with the kind of life you're trying to build. I've been thinking a lot about this recently because, I've just been reflecting over, my own growth and the kind of person I am compared to who I was even just a few years ago, and how much time I spend like working on myself. I'm always trying to become healthier and just more disciplined, more present, more emotionally aware. I wake up, I meditate, I train consistently, I try my best to eat well, I read, I reflect, I journal. I'm definitely not saying I have it all figured out by any means. I absolutely do not. I'm just someone who genuinely values like myself and my growth. So if I value those things in myself, why would it suddenly be wrong to want those same qualities in the people closest to me? Like, that doesn't feel judgmental to me. It just feels honest. It feels true. It feels real. It feels like it just feels aligned. To me, it makes sense. If someone spends years taking care of their health, it makes sense that they'd appreciate someone else who values their health. If someone works hard toward their goals, it makes sense that they'd admire someone who's driven as well. If kindness is something that's incredibly important to you, why wouldn't you want to be around kind people? To me, personally, that's not arrogance. It's just alignment. It comes down to being in alignment, and that's the part that I believe, people misunderstand. And I'll give a couple examples from my own life because I think they're the easiest way to explain what I mean. Let's say, for example, I meet a girl and I think she's beautiful. I think she checks a lot of boxes for me. We vibe, there's a vibe there. We have great conversations, we get along, I'm excited to get to know her more. And then all of a sudden when I'm with her, she pulls out a bait. And I already know some people are going to hear that and think, seriously, that's enough for you to lose interest? And honestly, it doesn't mean I instantly write somebody off, but it does make me pause. It makes me wonder if we actually prioritize the same things. Not because, I think she's a bad person. I may not even know her that well yet. It's not because I think I'm better than her. There are plenty great people in my life, like close friends of mine who vape. That's completely their choice. But for me, I spend a lot of time taking care of myself. My health is important to me. It's a priority. So when I see someone who regularly has a habit that doesn't really align with the way that I choose to live, it communicates something about our lifestyles. It tells me right then and there, in that very moment, that maybe we don't prioritize the same things. And that's okay. Neither of us is wrong. We're just probably not aligned. Or, here's another example. Let's say, same girl, everything's going great, we're out for dinner, and then I notice she's rude to our waiter or our server. Maybe she doesn't say thank you, maybe she's impatient, maybe she talks down to them over something that's completely out of their control. Again, it's in that moment, something shifts for me. Not because all of a sudden I think she's a terrible person. We all have bad days. I may not know the full story, right? One interaction doesn't define someone's entire character, of course not. But I pay attention to moments like that because I think they reveal what someone naturally values. To me, I was raised to be kind. Like kindness, I believe, is one of the most attractive qualities a person can have. I really believe the way you treat people generally, but just treat people who can't really do anything for you says a lot about your character. So when I see someone treating another person with disrespect, I naturally start wondering if our values are actually aligned. And I think that's what standards really are. They're not like superficial checklists, like, oh, you need to be this height. Like, they're just values. They're the qualities you're looking for because they're the same qualities you're trying to live by yourself. If I am trying my best every single day to be a kind person, and I take care of my health, I take care of my well-being, I go to the gym, I do XYZ to try to better myself, is it that crazy to say that I want that in somebody else? Like, for me, like, there's a disconnect there because I just don't understand why all of a sudden this topic has become controversial. I just don't get it. I think we've started confusing standards with like superiority, and they're completely different. You can respect someone, you can think they're a genuinely good person, you can wish the absolute best for them, and yet they still might not be the right person for you in your life. Everyone's valuable, everyone has worth, not everyone has compatibility. And I think that's one of the healthiest realizations you can have. Having compatibility with someone, being compatible with someone, it's just about like finding people whose values naturally fit with yours. And when you find that and you gel with that person, like, that's a beautiful thing. And I think the clearer you become about your standards and your values, and you just get really intentional with this kind of stuff, the less time you waste. You stop trying to force relationships that were never meant to work, were never going to work. You stop ignoring red flags because you don't want to be alone. You stop convincing yourself that good enough is enough when deep down you know it isn't. I think a lot of people settle, not because, they don't know what it is they want, but because they're afraid that if they don't settle, they'll end up with nothing. And I understand that fear. Like, walking away from something that's almost right is uncomfortable. Waiting is uncomfortable. Being patient is uncomfortable. But I also think settling comes with a cost. Every time you ignore or you walk away from your own standards just to make something work, you teach yourself that your values and your standards are negotiable. Over time, that chips away at your self-respect. Because deep down, you're accepting something that doesn't align with the life that you're trying to build. When you have a clear understanding of what your standards are and your values are, not only do you prevent yourself from getting in situations that are not good for you, but you also are open and draw so much more good to you, and you attract so many more opportunities and blessings that are truly aligned for you, because you know what you'd be willing to tolerate, and you know what your worth is. You know that you're not going to settle for just anything because you know what you're capable of and you know what you deserve. That right there is really empowering. And, something else that I've been thinking about is standards shouldn't just apply to other people. They should apply to you first. It's really easy to make a list of everything you want in someone else, for example. The harder question is, am I becoming that person too? If I want someone who's disciplined, am I disciplined? If I want someone who's kind, am I kind? If I want someone who's emotionally intelligent and emotionally mature, am I working on my own emotional maturity? Because I don't think standards are about demanding things from other people. I think they're a blueprint for the kind of person you're trying to become yourself. And when you actually become that person, you know what you deserve. You know what you want. So you're going to be more open to actually attracting those things into your life, because you're not just going to accept anything. There needs to be alignment there. And maybe that's why I think having standards is actually a form of self-respect. You're saying, these are the values and standards that matter to me, so I'm going to build my life around them. You're being intentional. You're protecting your time, you're protecting your energy, your peace, you're protecting your future. And honestly, I don't think enough people are doing that anymore. I don't think enough people actually are intentional and care about this kind of stuff. Everything today almost encourages us to ignore our intuition, to lower the bar, to accept things we know don't feel right because we don't want to seem difficult or come across as being too picky. I don't think being intentional is the same as being judgmental. I don't think having standards means you think you're better or you think you're above anybody else. I think it just means you've spent enough time getting to know yourself that you know what genuinely matters to you. And I think that's a really healthy place to get to. At the end of the day, your standards aren't about, excluding certain people. They're just about knowing like this is the kind of life that I want to build. This is the kind of life that's aligned with my values, and anything that's not that, like, I'm not really going to entertain. The quality of your life is shaped by what you're willing to accept. So don't let anyone make you feel guilty for having standards. Just make sure the standards you expect from others are the same ones you're willing to hold yourself to. I think that's where the balance is. And that's where, real self-respect begins, in my opinion. All having standards, in my eyes, really is. It's just about knowing what you're willing to accept and what you're not. They're just boundaries that protect your time, your energy, your emotional well-being. And without having standards, you end up saying yes to a lot of situations, to relationships and opportunities that just like weren't meant for you from the start. And I think we can all relate to that. What you want is a reflection of your standards, and your standards are a reflection of what you're willing to accept into your life. There's nothing wrong with that. I really believe that the people who create the healthiest relationships and friendships and just lives generally are usually the people who are clear about what matters to them, and they're intentional about protecting it. Don't not get clear about what it is you want and who it is you want to become and the standards and values that you hold dear to you. Don't not do that because you don't want to come across as too picky or seem judgmental. Like, being intentional is one of the most important things, in my opinion, that you can do. When you know who you are, you know your values, you know your priorities, you know what you're looking for, your decisions become much clearer, and you stop settling, and you actually attract way more opportunities that are actually in alignment with you to you. I really, really do believe that more people need to start, getting clear about what their values are and what their standards are. It's probably one of the most important things that I've done in the last few years as I've continued to just get older and just mature. I know who I am. I know what's important to me. And I want more of that into my life. I'm not going to accept things that aren't in alignment with things that are so key and so important to me. I'm just not. Why would you settle when there's things that are out there that are in alignment with you and do align with your values and standards? That's just at least how I see it. So I hope you got some value from listening to this. Thank you for being here and for being a part of everything that we're building here at Presence of Being. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. It helps get this message out. I really appreciate you listening, and I will see you in the next recording very soon.